call this meeting of the Johnson City City Commission to order for this August 19th, 2021. We're meeting in the Commission chambers at the Municipal and Safety Building. With our meeting called to order, I'll invite Pastor Bill Jolley to bring our invocation. If you'll all stand, please.
Let's pray together. Father, I come in the name of Jesus tonight and ask for your grace to be with us this evening. Lord, I'm so thankful to live here. Your word says that you determine the times and the places where we live. And so it's no accident that each of us are here tonight. Lord, we're so blessed to live in this region with these mountains, with the schools, with the medical community, with all the creative people that you've brought here, all the music and stories that shape our culture. And Lord, you commanded the Israelites in Babylon to pray for the peace and the flourishing of their city. And so I pray tonight for our city, for its peace and for its flourishing. Pray for all the citizens that are gathered here tonight, that they would experience your grace. I pray for the leaders, that they would have your wisdom and your discernment, your humility and your confidence. And may everything that is said and done here glorify you. I ask that in the name of Jesus. Amen.
You'll face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor, your first order of business is consideration of the minutes from your meeting held on Thursday, July the 29th.
Are there any modifications or a motion?
Move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. If there's not objection, we'll call the roll.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Mayor Wise?
Yes.
At this time, there will be the presentation of a proclamation recognizing International Overdose Awareness Day.
Whereas North America experiences the highest drug-related mortality rate in the world, accounting for 1 in 4 drug-related deaths globally, and whereas the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, affirms and acknowledges the harm and hardship caused by drug overdoses across the world, nation, state, and in our own community, and whereas in 2019, drug overdoses claimed the lives of more than 28 residents in Washington County, Tennessee, together with many more affected forever. Whereas the people affected by overdoses are our sons and daughters, our mothers and fathers, our brothers and sisters, and deserving of our love, compassion, and support. Whereas International Overdose Awareness Day is a global effort to remember loved ones lost to overdose and to end the stigma of drug-related deaths. And whereas the city resolves to play its part in reducing the toll of overdose in the local community. Now, therefore, I, Joe Wise, Mayor of the City of Johnson City, do hereby proclaim August 31st, 2020 as International Overdose Awareness Day. Thank you. And I'll let you say a few words.
Thank you. I just want to take a second and thank you guys for your support in this proclamation. Overdose and addiction really affects more people in our community that we can think of. Like the proclamation said, people's brothers, sisters, classmates struggle with not only overdose, but addiction on a daily basis. So I think it's really good that we're raising awareness for this on August 31st, as well as providing additional resources in the community for people that are struggling with addiction. And if you know anybody that is struggling with addiction, we at Inside Alliance in Johnson City have a lot of great resources for that. So if you or anybody you know are struggling, feel free to reach out to us at any time. And thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Your next order of business is consideration of a road closure request for the Meet the Mountains Festival to be held this weekend. These closures involve Commerce, King, and Millard Streets, as well as a closure of Main between Commerce and Buffalo. The street closures would be in effect from Friday, August 20th at 10 a.m. until Saturday, August 21st at 10:30 p.m. We would recommend your approval.
Is the applicant here? Yes. Would they care to? Got a crew.
My attempt to honor Ralph Van Brockman is no reminding me. Give each of you all a tie-dye t-shirt.
I don't think the mayor likes them either, so I'll take two.
Yeah. What people don't realize is that every time Ralph Van Brockman was handed a T-shirt, his response was, "What am I supposed to do with another T-shirt?" So,
But I have seen Ralph wear tie-dye.
yes. Okay.
Thank you,
I
wow.
think this is one that you would really
Thank you,
appreciate.
Mitch.
Thank you.
Oh, and a bottle. Hope it has some water in it, I forgot to bring some tonight. No,
Thank you.
I apologize.
That's
I remembered your
okay.
t-shirt. I forgot your watch.
I love the shirt. Thank you, Mitch.
Do you have comments you'd like to make about your event, or are there questions for the applicant about the road closure?
I'd be happy to address any questions you may have, but no comments needed.
Is there a
I would
motion?
move for approval.
We have a
Second.
motion and a second. If there's not objection, we'll call the roll.
Commissioner Brock?
yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Man, I'm just really excited about this happening in our area, so thank you guys for your hard work. Yes.
Vice Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Mayor Wise?
Yes. So for those who may not know, what is Meet the Mountains?
You know, I could speak, but this is a rare opportunity for me to dress down. And this is a rare opportunity for Ryan to be able to speak, so I'm gonna let Ryan talk about it because this
It's
is
an
probably
opportunity
one of
for
the
him to
biggest
dress up, right?
champions.
So, we brought Meet the Mountains here to kind of introduce the outdoors to everybody and to show like what beautiful region we have and what it has to offer. So we're doing is bringing all the activities that you can possibly do in this area and have them in one place. People who might not be able to experience it, who don't quite know what they want to do, but they do want to get outdoors. They can come experience it all in one place. So we've got a dual zip line that goes down the middle of Founders Park. We've got air dogs that will have competitions jumping into the pool. We've got a 40 by 60 foot demo pool, and that demo pool will have kayaking. It'll also have paddleboarding. We've got kids pump track course, bike course, and we also have axe throwing, and we have a rock wall, and then we have archery too as well. And everything's free thanks to our sponsors. They're the reason why we could provide it it's for adults, families, children, you name it, people of all ages.
I assume this question may be asked. Obviously, we want to take every precaution possible to be safe. There'll be masks at the entryway.
Oh, this is not about the axe throwing. Because that's the safety I was concerned about.
Well,
Okay.
we kind of like the dunk booth. We have a special spot for the mayor for that portion if you're interested. So.
Thank you, I'll pass.
We
Carry on.
have 2
I've
boxes
done
of
that
masks
before.
that we give out
Pass.
for
I've
free.
done it.
Yeah, all masks are gonna be free and available. We have 8 hand sanitizing stations from BioPure that they've provided. We also have, we requested that people stay distance, just safe distance, what they feel comfortable with. Also, we doubled our hand washing stations, and we'll have hand sanitizers at any of the installations too as well.
And it's outside.
And it's outside. And we've moved music in the evening to King Commons to kind of spread things out.
Now, you have some off-site activities as well, is that right?
Yeah, there'll be things throughout the region as well. And the whole intent is to get out, to use Founders as base camp and really be the spot where we all come together in terms of celebrating these mountains, but encouraging folks to get out. I know Connie Deegan's is doing a weed wrangle. You know, we've got some events going on throughout the region on that side as well. So, yeah,
He's doing a what?
a weed wrangle.
At Jacobs Park, is that
I believe that's
the one, yeah?
Oh, I was gonna give her my address.
So people who want to participate can go to Jacobs Park, and they're doing some kind of cleanup or something over there, and,
Yeah, But you can
Which
check
is
us
good.
out on Instagram, Facebook at MTM Fest. You can see everything that's going on. We also have an app.
Mhm.
And then highly encourage you to come check out King Commons. We've got a great band called Rusted Root. I am no music guru, but apparently have a really popular song.
Yeah.
Do you know
Yeah.
the name of the song?
Yeah, it's Send Me On My Way, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that'll be free as well, and we'd just love to have families, people of interest, and just people who want to get outside and try some new activities.
Yeah, we like to try to do the sustainability, and the other thing with sustainability is we always did cups, reusable, but this year we're doing one-use cups only, and we've already talked with our beer sponsor, and they agreed to, that's what they think that would be a safe protocol.
Where did he say Rusted Root was going to play?
We're gonna be
King
in King
Commons,
Commons.
Friday.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep.
They'll be on stage at 8 o'clock, and they have their opener coming on at 6:30.
So what time do the festivities begin?
6 o'clock on Friday, and it goes from 6 to 10. We have all the installations running full-time, and then on Friday, or Saturday, it'll be from 10 to 10.
Okay.
Make me
Okay.
feel
Look
old
forward
like you
to
don't
it.
know that song.
Yeah, that's good.
Be great. Hope to see you all there.
Yeah, absolutely.
One note too, if the shirt size does not work, let me know, and I'll make sure to get you the right size.
Well, thank you.
It's good, we'll wear them.
Thank
We-
you all.
Thank you.
We have voted on
Yes.
this, right? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Your next business is consideration of a temporary occasion license for Tennessee Hills Brewstillery. This is located at 458 West Walnut Street. This is to serve beer at the Meet the Mountains Festival to be held this weekend, August 2021, at 225 Commerce, 100 East Market, and 120 West King Street. The appropriate reviews have been made, finding no disqualifying factors, and the recommendation would be for your approval.
I assume you're the applicant?
Yes.
So if you'll give your name and business address?
My name is Samantha Teague. I'm with Tennessee Hills. Our address is 458 West Walnut Street, Johnson City.
Have you read the rules and regulations concerning the sale of alcohol in the city of Johnson City?
Yes.
Do you agree to abide by them?
Yes.
That's what we needed to hear.
Mayor,
So
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any objection to calling the roll?
Commissioner Brock,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fowler,
Yes.
Mayor Wise.
Yes. So they've already described the event, but where will you all be during the event?
Yeah, so we will have 4 separate beer stations. Each station will have, of course, servers with their appropriate permits and licenses serving beer, but we will also have separate stations selling tickets and ID wristbands, so every person will be ID'd with a wristband to indicate that they're of the age to drink alcohol. We have stations located among each of the awesome events that were mentioned for the Meet the Mountains Festival, and we'll be serving beer only during the event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming.
The next order of business is consideration of the consent agenda.
Commissioner Hunter, do you have items you wish to pull?
Yeah, could we pull 7.1.1 through 7.5.1? I just wanted to see your reaction. I'm sorry.
I was trying to
mean
figure
the
out what you
whole
were
thing?
saying.
Okay.
Was mine?
No, I don't have any.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Brock, any jokes from you?
No, I have one, 7.1.7. I think it'd be good
0.7.
information for the public.
Okay. Is that the only one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
None for me.
Commissioner Murphy?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. So we have one at 7.1.7 is an agreement. Well, I'll let you read it, Mr. Peterson.
Preston, if you would, please, sir. As Preston's coming up, as you all are aware, we've made a significant investment in the restoration of the Langston Center. And then in the subsequent year or two, we've made quite a good investment replacing water and sewer lines and rebuilding streets and sidewalks. And Preston and I have talked about a concept of additional improvements in that neighborhood and different ways that we could partner with different organizations to help stimulate regrowth and regeneration in that neighborhood. And Preston and his folks have worked really hard with some other organizations and has come up with a really neat concept. And while we're asking you to look at this one particular proposal, what I hope that this board would do would be to look at this concept and if you find it acceptable, make it a concept that you can pick this model up and use in other locations across the city. It's a great reuse of some underutilized property and an opportunity to get some folks in some housing that's affordable. So Preston, if you would, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. To piggyback on the concept that the city manager was talking about, it's actually not anything new. When we got started in these conversations, Steve Baldwin, who was the community development official for the city before, and I know many of you know him, he was very instrumental in these conversations and said that there were attempts in the past to do a concentrated home build like this. So we're really excited, feel really blessed that the timing is right for this kind of thing to come together. One of the questions going back even to Steve's days was how we would handle land banking and how we would handle the acquisition of the lots, because it really is not something the city needs to get into in terms of buying and conveying real estate on a regular basis. And so as part of these conversations, we knew that First Tennessee Development District and the work that they do and kind of how they're set up with their foundation, there was an opportunity there for them to act as the land bank. And so so Bill Forrester, planning director for First Tennessee Development District, worked directly with his executive director and the foundation, and they could not have been more willing to be a part of this and more excited. And so that's how this concept came together, that we were able to put into a package and something that we can replicate in other areas around the city. So if and when we come upon a series of lots that might adjoin one another or be within 1 or 2 blocks of each other, and we could do a concentrated home build, First Tennessee can use CDBG funds to purchase those lots. They will bank them in their foundation, and then those would be conveyed to the appropriate home building agencies. And then that can, again, be replicated in different areas around the city. So it's really exciting. And so here on the screen here are the representative agencies. Again, First Tennessee, which I've mentioned on the left at the top there. And then I wanted to point out that on the back row here, you've got the representatives from each of the bottom 3 agencies there. Walter Crouch is the president and CEO of Appalachia Service Project. You've got Sherry Trent from Eastern 8, and then you have Laura Kelly, who's with Holston Habitat. And this team has just been phenomenal, and their willingness to work together has just been great. So as the manager had already mentioned, with Langston coming together like it did, and then Phil coming behind that with reconstruction of Welborn Street and the improvements to East Myrtle and East Fairview, we knew there was an opportunity here to really kind of put a third leg on this stool, and that is there were some vacant lots available along East Myrtle. But where the conversation really began was with 221 East Myrtle. The city purchased that lot last summer because it was a code enforcement case. Gentleman said, listen, you know, I'd be more than happy if the city just takes this off my hands and then, you know, handle the demolition. And so that's what the city did. And so this is an opportunity now for the city to convey that to one of our community development agencies and allow for a new home to be built. And so that's the request before you tonight. It's 2-part. One, on the consent agenda, is the agreement to convey, and then the ordinance, which comes under first readings, is the ordinance to convey the property to ASP. But as we got into those conversations, we saw that 219 and 217 were also available, as well as 215. It turns out that 219 and 217 are owned by the same individual. So Sherry Trent's realtor reached out, and he was willing to sell. So great opportunity there for Laura at Holston and Sherry at Eastern 8 to be able to jump on and grab 219 and 217. Now, the lots in yellow, those are vacant lots as well. Those 215 and 212 are owned by a family that they're not with us anymore. The heirs have the property, and the heirs live out of town, so that one's been a little more difficult, but we're continuing to pursue that one. The parking lot here that's owned by Frontier Health, I've engaged conversation with Frontier, and initially they expressed a willingness to sell that lot because that's potentially two new lots right there. As of last week, they had backed off of that a little bit, said they have some improvements they're about to make to the hospital, so they're going to hold for right now, but that's okay. So moving forward, what we could potentially have, even as soon as next year, are 3 new single-family homes, all built by 3 individual community development agencies. This is just such an exciting improvement and opportunity here for the Langston neighborhood. Mr. Peterson and I talked about this going several months back and had discussed the idea of some very minimal design considerations. And one is alley access because of the sidewalk improvements that Public Works has done along East Myrtle. Also just the fact that this is an urban neighborhood and so the alley is there. And all 3 agencies have agreed to that. Reducing the front setbacks and then providing for front porches at least 6 foot deep by about 50 to 51% of the front of the house. And then what's really exciting is General Shale has been in contact with this group and said that they may have an interest in donating some brick for the homes. Now, not brick to completely wrap all the homes in brick, but a certain percentage. And we don't know exactly what that is yet, but that's an exciting part of the conversation. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Manager, but we're just very excited to bring this to you, and I know these folks back here are as well.
We'll be glad to answer any questions.
I think it is an exciting project, and glad our providers are here with us tonight. I was glad to hear about the porches. I'm really kind of big on porches. That's important in today's world, to have a welcoming place to be a good neighborhood citizen. So it's great. Thank you.
And for citizens generally, you know, what we're replacing is a derelict lot filled with trash with an affordable house. And so that's a win for everybody. And it doubles down on an investment we've been making for a number of years in that Langston neighborhood. And so to all 3 of the agencies, we're certainly glad to have you participating in this way. So thank you, Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't think there were any other consent agenda items, so is there
Move for
action?
approval.
We have a motion.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Murphy. If there's not objection, we'll call the roll. Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Brock,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fowler,
Yes.
Mayor Wise.
Yes.
Thank you. I think this is a concept that will work very well in a number of different locations. And we're currently in an ongoing conversation with Washington County about properties that are going through the tax sale process that there is no buyer for, and trying to work out a process with them to where those lots could be bought out of the court system and utilized in a similar fashion. So I think that there's some really good things in the works with trying to provide affordable housing to folks, and hopefully this will be a concept being used for many years to come. So thank you. First order of business under ordinances for first reading is ordinance number 478121. An ordinance to revise the code of the City of Johnson City to prohibit resetting fire alarm control panels by amending Title VII, Chapter 1 of the Code of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, and repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, is ready for your consideration on first reading. Chief,
How are you?
welcome. If
Well,
you'd explain the ordinance, please, Jason.
Yes. What we're attempting to do here is to limit property owners and representatives from resetting their alarms when they're activated, because what happens is it doesn't allow us an opportunity to identify the source of that false alarm, and thereby we can't educate them or support them in finding a solution to prevent that. Our biggest concern is unnecessary false alarms create complacency, both in the occupants of a building and also with our responders. If we go there too routinely, then it becomes the expectation that it's going to be a false alarm. And people already have a difficulty as far as occupants go in adhering to the alarm. So that's what this ordinance is designed to do.
Are there questions?
How would you communicate this change?
Well, we don't expect to penalize anyone. We think that through just the education and making people aware of the fact that they need to not do that. We expect that there'll be folks who do break the ordinance, but again, we have discretion in when we want to bring them before the city court, and that would certainly be the last ditch effort there if we couldn't get them to comply. So we feel like it's going to be a heavily dependent upon our responders to make sure that they are educating these folks that not only is it a good practice not to do it, but now it's also, there's also an ordinance against doing that.
So their alarm goes off. Let's just kind of walk through this. Their alarm goes off. They realize it's a false alarm. You don't know yet. You just get the alarm. And so you're dispatching a group to come out to
Yes.
investigate it. And in the meantime, they're resetting the alarm. Is that
Yeah.
what you're?
Yeah, and oftentimes, depending upon the occupancy, and I'll give you a good example, is like at a hotel or a motel. The alarm goes off and their immediate assumption is that it's not a fire. Unfortunately, that's how people respond to fire alarms in a lot of cases, but it's the reality. And whether they do an investigation to find out if there really is a fire or not, it's unbeknownst to us, but oftentimes when we arrive there, they've decided that it is false and they've tried to reset it.
I gotcha.
And so all of the information then is kind of locked out from our access. If we were to, be able to reach into the system with a computer and, see all the things that the alarm companies could see, we could get that information, but it's not timely to go through that process. And so what we'd rather them do is just investigate to see if there is a fire. If there is no fire, then we certainly have no problem with them silencing the noise and the alarms, but we want them to leave the alarm active so that we can go there and help them to figure out what needs to be done to correct that.
Thank you.
Questions or a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. If there's not objection, we'll call the roll.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Mayor Wise?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Your next ordinance for consideration is ordinance 4788-21. An ordinance authorizing the conveyance to Appalachia Service Project Incorporated of a certain parcel of real property owned by the city of Johnson City and located in the 9th Civil District of Washington County, Tennessee, upon the terms and conditions contained herein, and repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, ready for your consideration on first reading. And this is the actual conveyance ordinance for the property we spoke of just a moment ago.
Are there questions for Mr. Mitchell or a motion?
Move for approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. If there's not objection, we'll call the roll.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Your next order of business is ordinances on consideration for second reading, the first being ordinance 4779-21. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt a code of laws and ordinances for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith and amendatory thereof by changing from R2 low-density residential zoning to A1 agricultural zoning. Certain property located at 519 Claude Simmons Road is ready for your consideration on second reading and public hearing.
Doesn't look like the PowerPoint wants to pull up at all.
Preston has jinxed you.
He has. Let me see if I can go a different way. there's just a little computer issue going on altogether.
Perhaps you can paint a picture
I was
with your
gonna say.
words.
Okay, I can do that. So, in your packet, if you, oh, maybe, there we go, yay. Technology is great when it works. Okay. So here along Claude Simmons Road, there is about a little shy of 47 acre parcel that has been zoned R2. What they're asking for is A1, which is an agricultural zoning. What the applicant intends to do is basically just to have a family farm. With something that size, you do need, or he said at the planning commission meeting, and will probably reiterate, that you do need some type of agricultural activity to keep it in check. So just so you know, in your packet, you cannot, it might be a little hard to read these, but in your packet, it included the permitted uses that are in A1, because their concept plan, because anytime you are adjacent to residential, you provide a concept plan, is any of the uses that are in A1. They don't plan to use all of these. Mostly it'll be a horse farm. But to kind of show you kind of boundary-wise, this is on our urban growth, right at the edge of our urban growth boundary, and around it is Washington County zoning. So right here is the urban service boundary, so it's very close. And then just to show, we did this at first reading, but just for the public's knowledge, what that zoning looks like from Washington County. It's just a flip. So this would be Johnson City, and then this is the county, and it's zoned A1. You may have recalled that this came before you when it was annexed as Bent Oaks. That subdivision will go away with this kind of activity. The future land use plan calls for it to be residential, so this would fall in line with that. Just I'll go back through just some pictures from the road. And then at the neighborhood meeting, there was some neighbors in attendance and one neighbor spoke against potential noxious uses that are associated with the farm, but most of them had questions about what would happen on the property. And staff recommends approval, and there are policies of the bridge plan before you that would support that.
Ms. Hodges, this was zoned, it was agricultural, then
Yes.
it got zoned R2, and that's only, what, a year and a half ago? 2 years at the most?
COVID ruins my math, but I want to say somewhere to two and a half, maybe 3.
It was just reverting to the
Yes.
original zoning.
Mhm.
Okay.
Are there other questions for staff? All right. Thank you. We'll open public hearing on second reading for anyone wishing to address this item.
Either of the Dr. Sturgills want to talk back there?
But they don't have to feel like they
don't
have to either. So
Imagine that.
we'll close public hearing and look to the commission for a motion.
I move for approval.
Second motion and a second. If there's no objection, we'll call the roll.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Next is ordinance number 4784-21. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt a code of laws and ordinances for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith, and amendatory thereof by changing from R3 medium-density residential zoning to R4 medium-density residential zoning. Certain property located at 2803 Browns Mill Road is ready for your consideration on second reading after public hearing.
To go back over the request for the public, I know we did talk about it at the first reading, but just to highlight a few things, and then to the additional information that you guys requested is what we'll be discussing tonight. This is the property in question located on Browns Mill Road. They are looking for additional density. Currently, the request or the zoning would allow 7 units per acre. The request would change the zoning to something that would allow up to 14. They're requesting with their concept plan about 12. And just so that you have like an idea of what's around it, this is what's currently on the ground, the densities on the ground, and then what would be approved in those particular areas, as well as the R2A. I wanted to add that in. That was just so that you know what that's about, what the density is around it. Some examples of the adjoining properties that are more dense, and then their concept plan. So what they would like to do is to bring in their drive here. This is their amenity center, and then they have 5 buildings that will be 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. In their, from their first iteration to the second, they've moved their dumpster to be a little bit more centralized to the residents. It was actually out on the street at one point. And then also aligned this this office and clubhouse kind of thing to be more in line with what is along the road. They are keeping, basically the buildable area is on that higher side. This over here has very steep slopes. And then they'll meet the parking regulations and things like that. But one of the issues that we talked about, kind of looking at it with photos of property, is Browns Mill Road and the character of Browns Mill Road and what can happen as far as on Browns Mill Road. There has been a lot of discussion about traffic, speeds, capacity, and Mr. Penzola can speak a lot more eloquently to that than I can, and educated. But just to continue down that land use path, this is in the land use, future land use map, it is residential. Our land use map does not call out for what type of residential. And these are the policies and of the strategic and bridge plan that would support that, or would support an approval. Because staff recommended approval and planning commission has recommended approval. One of the questions that was asked was about how many students, and the school system provided a multiplier for multifamily. What I can tell you that with their multiplier, it should add about 25 students. Now, that does not mean 25 kindergartners. They did not provide anything about what their breakdown would be, but imagine that that would be the impact to the school system, whether it be K through 12. Any questions for me so far?
Questions? I think we had some other questions.
You did have some other traffic questions about, and I would prefer Mr. Penzola to answer those.
Yeah.
We're asked to assess the rezoning from a traffic standpoint. And what I'm going to do is give you some statistics to help you decide what you want to do. If you compare the existing zoning to what's proposed, you're adding about 300 trips a day. And generally speaking, you're adding roughly 700 trips a day for the development as a whole.
Go back through that. I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow you, Phil.
I think it's 700 trips a day. If the multiplier is 6 trips per unit. If you take the difference between what he's proposing and what the current zoning is, that's an additional 50 units. So you're adding essentially an additional 300 units above what the existing zoning allows, okay?
600 trips a day,
700.
700 if
720.
he goes with the larger footprint or larger density.
So we looked at that, and then we looked at traffic volumes on the street. Since 2004, the traffic volumes have been roughly 2,000 trips per day. From our standpoint, 2,000 trips a day is nothing. That really, it's fairly vacant, except maybe at a peak period. The lane widths, which would be a concern, are actually sufficient. They're 11-foot wide lane widths. So we don't have a concern over the volumes, the volume issues, whether today it's very minimal, and even with this development, it's minimal. We then look at growth rates.
Can we back up before you take off on that? Did you do new traffic counts, or is this 2,000 what's coming out of the state?
TDOT does traffic counts annually, and so we were relying on the historical data from TDOT. But we also did traffic counts because we're looking at other issues as well that I'll get into. So now we look at, well, what would the growth be in the area? And because the volumes have been the same since 2004, which was actually a step down from roughly 3,000 trips a day, something happened out there that reduced the volumes to the 2,000 mark and has stayed roughly at 2,000 every year since. It was at 3,000, and I can't tell you how far back, but I did see 4 years of data. So we look at growth, and because it hasn't changed, and because we pretty much know we're full build out, we feel as if in this area we're at full build out. Even Oakland Avenue is roughly at full build out because it is staying at around 9,000 trips per day and just stays that way through the years. So there's not much economic activity that's being added to that particular area of the community. If you go over to Peoples Street, that's a different story because there's so much vacant land still available to develop. We do project that there would be a growth to the amount of traffic at Peoples. And so today, it's around 7,000 trips per day. And in the future, we would project that to go up based on the types of developments that occur. There's a lot of vacant land. That will change. The balance of it won't. The only areas in the immediate area would be on Swanee. Swanee has a couple of tracts of land that would develop, and rightly so. We believe that that traffic will generally exit via Browns Mill because it is so difficult to exit Roan. People wise up pretty quick. We looked at Roan, and because we're putting sidewalks in at Roan, could we improve it to the proper sight distance for an intersecting street? And the answer is no. No matter what I do, I can improve it, but I can't because of the curvature of Roan Street. So that's why we believe that, yes, they may enter, but I doubt they'll exit very often. So they will exit, and that will have some minor impact on Browns Mill. We then looked at sight distance on Browns Mill. Is the development have adequate sight distance? The answer is yes, no question about it. We then looked at sight distance of the structures that are located along Browns Mill. There are 31 houses along Browns Mill. 61% of them have adequate sight distance. Another 13% have decent access, decent sight distance. We then, and then there's 26% that there are some concerns. What the residents expressed during the Planning Commission was that they backed out into the road. Okay? So we looked at every single individual residence to see if in fact they could adjust themselves to provide a turnaround on their property. And essentially, there were only two that had some question, and they didn't know if they could access a side street or not. And so of all those, they can make adjustments so that they don't have to back out into the street and occupy the street for longer than you would if you're just turning in or turning out. There are 10 public streets. 80% of them are adequate. A couple of them have concerns in which the sight distance would be marginally appropriate. The residents will say, the response that we had was, we have a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, right? So when we get petitioned in the community for speed humps, we look at a benchmark of the 85th percentile. What does the 85th percentile tell you about the speeds of traffic in an area, any area in town? And if it doesn't, if the 85th percentile is not greater than 8 miles an hour over the posted speed limit, then you're not eligible for speed humps. You're also not eligible for speed humps if you're on a collector arterial, because it has an impact on emergency services, fire trucks, etc. So we looked at the speeds of the traffic. When I mentioned 25 miles an hour, everybody jumped up and down because they said they're going a lot faster. And our conclusion is they're right. They are going faster. They're up to 42 miles per hour is the 85th percentile on one side, and then down where the development is, it's at 47 miles per hour because you've got two hills coming down. And so our conclusion was that we have to do something, not because of the development, but because that's the condition of as it is today. So what do? And we looked at the width of the right-of-way is about 60 feet. And so it's adequate to put, because speed humps really aren't eligible, and they're not eligible if the grades are greater than 8%, which a lot of it is. We would suggest that you take a hard look, regardless of this development, take a hard look at putting some type of traffic control measure where the residents are towards Oakland, and a traffic circle at Swanee, where the development essentially is going to occur. I've talked to the developer about participating, and there is a willingness on his part to participate. But we have that problem today, and we've got to get the speeds down to something adequate for the residents to feel comfortable. We looked at accidents. In the stretch of road, the accidents are less than one a year. They're probably caused by things like hitting mirrors or something like that. We're not concerned. When we looked at the intersections that you have on both sides, you have an intersection at Oakland and you have an intersection at Peoples. When we look at what to recommend to Pete for capital improvements, we do look at accident rates. That's what's the rate per million vehicles entering an intersection. And we're not too concerned when that number is above, we start looking if the number gets above 2. And the number at Oakland is 0.5. The number at People Street is 0.78. Once we get that information, then we look at other things like inordinate delays. Or is there some condition out there like vegetation or something, we gotta take care of the problems. And so we have come back, as I indicated to these folks, we have come back and suggested that we really ought to look at Peoples, no question. In fact, we've had a meeting with the Browns Mill Villas people this week who were also concerned about that intersection. And so that could be something like a signal or a traffic circle, if you choose to do that. It has not been presented to you. At Oakland Avenue, we've done everything. We've got left turns, we've got right turns. What the concern is whether or not the people involved in the accidents have the patience, or are they alert enough? And so our suggestion at that location, since there's really not any structural improvements that could be made, would be to follow what we've done at Baxter and Unaka. We put LED lights around the stop signs. Since the time that we put those LED lights up in April, we've had no accidents. What the LED lights we think occurs is it raises the consciousness of the driver. Okay, there's something different. Just as they do on Baxter, there's something different. So we would suggest that we ought to go ahead and do that. If we can get the speeds on the road down, then these number of cases in which there is inadequate sight distance for the homeowners, a lot of it would disappear. We'd have slower traffic. We could make the development compatible with the area. It is consistent with long-term growth, everything that we've said. So that was the conclusion drawn, and the statistics behind that recommendation to you, for you to consider and as you consider this rezoning.
You mentioned traffic calming being potentially a circle at Swanee, and then something else, I guess, north of that.
Probably at
like Hazel.
Chapman.
Okay.
Or
and what
Hazel, and the reason
what would
we
that
were
be?
thinking Chapman, but I think there's a large tree there that maybe doesn't need to be disrupted. What we're looking for is balance, because the impact zone of a traffic control device is roughly 500 feet on either side. That seemed to balance pretty well. I don't like putting them in, just be putting them in everywhere. If one will do the trick, great. I think
But it wouldn't be a speed hump or a speed table. Like what could you use on a collector or arterial?
Traffic circle.
So you'd be doing 2 traffic circles?
Yeah.
Okay.
Phil, I have 2 questions. You mentioned that y'all also did some traffic counts, but you didn't tell us the results of your own local traffic counts. I thought that's what you said.
We did the local traffic counts, and we had to do that to do the speed count. So the numbers I gave you were our counts on speed and our counts actually on the traffic, which was with the ADT, which was consistent with what the state counts were.
That's 2,000. The proposed development would add another 700 then to that count, so it'd be
Yes, that's
roughly 2,700.
insignificant in our book.
Yeah, okay.
It's interesting when you look at the speed of Peoples Street. Peoples Street has 7,000 vehicles a day, and it's 3 lane. You would think that it would be pretty high. If this is running at 47 miles per hour, you think it's actually lower. It's counterintuitive to what you would think. But the more traffic you put on a street, the slower the traffic. So Oakland's not even registered. It's pretty.
The second question was about at Oakland, where, I don't know if it's called Brown's Mill, where it comes out on Oakland. It may, because it kind of does a little
That's Brown's Mill.
dogleg.
We
So-
tried to get it away from the intersection as far as possible. Because
And
we
then
keep jamming up these
Then you
intersections.
talked about delay. You know, I think we've all been through there, and you sit there for a long time because you got cars coming through the intersection, out the car wash, and, you know, it's a pretty busy place to try to pull out. If you add more vehicles to that, is that gonna make that a worse problem?
At very peak periods, you might have some delay. It's not enough for us to be concerned about because the volumes are so low. It may be to them, but it isn't to us. Putting a traffic control measure that stops the traffic on Oakland, we would not recommend because Oakland, sometimes it backs up through Oakland, right? That's an Oakland concern. This one, if you come down and you got that, then you're at peak periods. And so it's difficult to make a left turn, even though you have a storage lane at that location. So you make issues, but it's not something that jumps out at us when we look at the community as a whole.
Can you clarify so right now, there's nothing on this property, and we're getting 2,000 car trips a day. Then you had a number you were projecting for if it built out at the R3, 7 units per acre, and that's the
That's
300 number?
No, the difference between, that would be 425. And then what he's building are 50 units greater than the maximum he could build under the current zone.
And that 50 units results in 700 car trips?
300.
300 extra, yeah.
Oh, okay, thank
Get you
you.
up to
So
300.
you're adding those two
Yeah,
together?
the manual
Okay.
says 6 trips per day. Our experience isn't that high here in Johnson City, but
Are there other questions for
Could I
Phil?
see the site plan picture again? I just want to get a better idea of the driveway, proposed driveway in correlation with the potential roundabout, like how far away they are from each other.
Is
Oh, yeah,
75 feet from the intersection.
that works.
I think
So it'd be at Swanee,
at Swanee going to the north, or going up the page.
and it'd be a roundabout like what's
At Swanee.
behind the Walmart?
It's
Is that
down
what
from
you're
Cootie Brown's, right where Cootie Brown's comes out to Brown's
It
Mill.
wouldn't be that big?
You don't have 4 lanes of traffic coming off of Browns Mill there.
Right, okay.
The reason he's going up the side of the hills, how difficult it is to build, because there is a lot of fill material that has to go in. We have a creek that crosses something like this, okay? So the roundabout would be here. There's also a creek that's running over here, and he's concerned about how to cross that creek or that water control, and he'll probably keep a big creek. This is a lot of fill, so he's agreeing, to provide the fill material so that we can build the roundabout. And then there is a power pole, right? So we have to move the power pole. I believe he'll agree to move the power bill. I had the power board out there to give a cost.
Are there other questions for Mr. Penzola? Okay, thank you. Before we open for public hearing, is the applicant or the petitioner here wish to address any questions that you may have heard or say what you will about your project. Give your name and your address, please.
Sure. Good evening. My name's Rick Gentry, 12248 Patagonia Lane, Knoxville, Tennessee. I did want to ask Phil one question. In other times that he spoke, you said 10,000 cars on that road is no big deal.
Yeah, what he's alluding to is, what's the capacity of different roads? And our feeling is that the capacity of a two-lane road is 12,000 or so. Once you get to that point, you really start having to look at both intersections, storage lanes for left turn storage. We're not even close to those numbers.
Thank you. Let me see here. I'll get this off of here.
May I ask Mr. Penzola one other question while you are getting ready there? You let us know that each of the lanes are 11 feet wide. And there are other roads in town that are that same width. Most of them have shoulders on them or, berms on the side that give you a little additional space. Browns Mill doesn't. I mean, there are places there that we saw, particularly where the little canyon is, that after you dance, could you answer this question?
You think I was at Meet the Mountains? Where's Mitch Miller?
I think that was from the 1970s right there. But there's really not
No
anything.
question, and we pointed that out. There ought to be upgrades to that. That's ridiculous to have ditch lines that close to a road. But it hasn't presented a problem that we can see. We know it's there. We know it ought to be fixed. When we rebuilt the intersection, we put curbs up the street, but we were stopped from running the curbs on up the street. It should have curbs at some point. That should be a project at some point, because it's not good to have the ditch lines. It's not good not to have sidewalks in that area. You know that as well as I do. We've got that all over town where we ought to be putting sidewalks in. That area needs it as bad as anybody, just to make it feel more comfortable. That's a bigger project, but it ought to be done.
Thanks.
I just wanted to spend a few minutes and show you what I've done in the last 26 years. This is my website. I tried to make it 2 pages and ended up 3.5, but let's see here. That is a building on Cumberland Avenue. How do you get this thing down? And on the right there, you may recognize that building. It's on the right side of the Carnegie Hotel. I built it in like 2006 here in Johnson City. That was on a brownfield site, by the way. The second picture is the one I just showed you. The third picture, I've renovated, I don't know, 8 or 10 apartment complexes. That particular one was condemned and in bankruptcy court when I bought or tried to buy it. And on the right is a single-family subdivision. I've got 8 houses left in there. I don't really remember how I got in the house building business, but let's go up here. As far as types of projects, now, I'm a commercial real estate broker also. And I'm just showing you types that I've built and types that I've brokered. And the Rural Development 515 loan, I've brokered some of those. That program is over in the 80s. Section 8, they don't build those anymore. They've still got the vouchers. I've managed those for First Tennessee Bank. The only low-income housing projects that I know is the low-income tax housing credits, which it's really workforce housing. It's a great plan. It's hard to believe that the Department of HUD came up with it, but it's really a good plan. I've done student housing, a lot of market rate, independent senior housing, and condominiums. That's all I do is multifamily. I don't get bogged down in anything else. That was a deal I brokered. It's over on the University of Tennessee campus. And I went to University of Tennessee. I'm on the Knox County IDB. I've owned University Real Estate and Property Management. I've worked for Cushman & Wakefield. They're the second commercial brokerage house in the world. Navis Young, they're the fastest. And I just started my own company about 1.5 years ago, just so I don't have to even think about that other stuff. That's a low-income tax housing credit. I did the brokerage on the land. This one right here is that's Lake Plaza. If you ever go to a football game, this is directly behind the McDonald's on Cumberland Avenue. It's a 10-story building, steel and concrete. And when we started doing the core drillings, we found 30 feet of good dirt and 70 feet of air. And we couldn't do caisson, so we did some geo-piers, a bunch of them. But we had a room full of engineers, and I asked them, what's the probability that it sinks? And they said 2%. And I said, well, what do you do? And they said, well, just jack it back up. I mean, I didn't even want to be part of this, but I was. Washington Pike, I've bought some property and got it all entitled. Same thing on the Tapestry. I'm brokering, it's 298 units I did on Hardin Valley. I got another 298 with the same company, just about under contract. And then that's the one that's 298. And this one is the Kodak Crossing was in Sevierville, where they have a terrible problem with commuting in and out of the county. And the only reason I'm going to show you my contact page is, I don't know how this one got back there, but that's Laurel Station, and I built that in a historic zone. So you can see the architecture that they required. But that's about it. Anybody got any questions?
What category of apartments are you considering out off Browns Mill? You had all those different types.
Market rate, high end. That's all you can build these days. I mean, because it's so expensive to construct with wood prices and everything else. Subcontractors. That's the worst thing. I mean, we managed the shortage on appliances and fuses and. Sorry about that. We've managed lumber. We've shortages on siding. And as they told us in the spring that the supply chain was clearing up, we found another problem, and that's all these subs. They didn't invent any more subs. And, you know, when housing goes way up, they've got to stretch them thin. And then, you know, about July, they get tired and they want to go on vacation, and it's been very difficult to build houses.
Are there other questions for Mr. Gentry?
Is there an image of kind of what you think it'll look like?
I've got a couple. I mean, this is just.
Stay at the microphone, and I'll
Well, I don't have much really hand out. Just kind of a cross between these two. You know, I like the top of the one that's white colored. I like the brick, and do some siding and just mix it up.
Thank you.
Are there questions for Mr. Gentry? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and anyone wishing to speak for or against 478421 is invited to approach the podium. If others have already said what you might have been inclined to say, there's no need to re-say it. We will certainly be taking all of that into account. So I'll invite anyone who wishes to go first. Don't all come at once.
3 minutes?
And yeah, we will set a 3-minute timer, and I'll ask Commissioner Brock, will you be the keeper of the time? So if you'll give your name and address. And
My name is Ryan Potter. My address is 413 Peachtree Street, Johnson City, Tennessee. And one thing that I can speak for, I work at Wallace Imports in Johnson City. We do a lot of test drives out through the area. When we go on test drives, a lot of my customers like going through this road, through Browns Mill, because it is a tight-knit area, and a lot of times they're not comfortable with the heavily trafficked areas throughout the area. And when they go through here, one thing that I notice as I don't live here. I live out on Science Hill, but I notice a lot of people, they use personal transport devices, bicycles, electric scooters, what it's called a one-wheel on this road on Browns Mill, and they go and they commute to Oakland and things like into other areas to go to the mall and things like that. And that is a concern for me, not as a resident, but just as a community member, and seeing the amount of traffic that goes through here. And when I hear numbers like 600 and 700, and when people look at numbers and they say, well, 600, that's not a lot, and 700, that's not a lot, or whatever, but when we're looking at a number of 2,000, and then we add 600 or 700 to that, that's 25%. That's a huge number. That's 1/4 increase. And yeah, 600 doesn't sound like a lot, but 1/4, increasing 1/4 of traffic through here, and that's projection. You know, we don't know what type of families and who's gonna be living here and how many times they're gonna go out and through there. And that's me. I'm one individual at one car lot. We have 20 different people on my lot, just my lot there at Wallace Imports, that go through and use this route as a travel destination, that we feel safe, that we can say, yeah, guys, if you would like to come through here and travel through here, this is a safe route that we know that we can take you. We don't have to worry about congestion. That's not to mention Toyota or Honda or Chevrolet or whomever else drives through there, the Mazda dealership. And that's just my 2 cents, and I want the community to be safe. And I you know, that's just all I have to say about that, and that area and that road and the development. And thank you for listening to me.
thank you. Give your name and address, please.
Paul Anderson. I live on Berkeley Court. Good evening, Commissioners. So, as the headline from the Johnson City Press stated on July 19th, all the residents in our neighborhood oppose this 120-unit, 5-story apartment blocks. And if I could ask permission, or if it's okay, if I could ask the residents that oppose this to please stand up. Is that okay to do? I mean, this is everybody in the neighborhood. So, I appreciate it. Thank you. So, as you all heard, we're especially concerned for the safety of travel on Browns Mill Road. You know, the road sight lines admittedly are terrible. The road really, of course, has no shoulder, which places pedestrians at a lot of risk, even with the proposed sidewalk just in front of the complex. Weekly, we see people walking up and down the road, mainly with Kroger shopping bags, and we just cringe for their safety. I mean, if this project goes through, there will be a lot of children riding and walking to their bikes to go to Kroger's to get snacks and sodas. I mean, that's what kids are going to do. This is really going to be a critical safety issue. So again, we live on Berkeley Court, and you know, it's very difficult to access Brown Mills Road. We figure we have about 3 seconds to make a decision because of the cars flying over the top of that. So, and you know, of course, not one week goes by that we don't have to slam on the brakes or gun it to traverse it safely. So again, we are a neighborhood of single-family homes, and placing 5 3-story apartment blocks is way out of character for our area. And then you add another 600 to 800 additional cars turning in and out of that complex. You know, we were thinking the Browns, the Littles, the Cloyds, the Landers, and the Grindstaff families facing a proposed complex driveway or alongside it. What would having 600 to 800 vehicles turning in front of your homes do to the quality of their life and their safety? You know, these families have been here for decades, and in some cases, many, many generations. So I ask you, commissioners, just for a moment to please place your families into the homes of the families I just mentioned. Think of the anguish that they're going through right now as we are nearly powerless to stop this project without your help. And can anyone here say for sure that those folks will be able to sell their homes for fair market value in the future if this complex is in front of their homes? I mean, you know, we're not opposed to developing this lot. If single families homes can't be built there, then something like the Stonebrook Townhomes or the Brown Mills Apartments on Browns Mill Road would be more than appropriate, other than the 5 3-story apartment blocks. You know, at the end of all this, if the complex is approved, Mr. Gentry will get in his vehicle and drive to his nice home in Knoxville, while the rest of us suffer the consequences of diminished quality of life and safety, falling property values, increased noise, and vehicle emission pollution. So, you know, we respectfully ask you to please reject this rezoning proposal and allow our friends and neighbors the dignity of living peacefully and safely in their homes as we are now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I got to drop through, so I'm going to pass out from my own carbon dioxide. She got away with it. Hope I can too. Bob Archer, 260 West Springbrook Drive. And you know, a lot of things have come up here. It kind of crowds my talking points. What I'm kind of getting, even from Mr. Pinzola's presentation and looking at some of y'all, and you're asking questions and thinking, if you do anything to improve Browns Mill Road, it's massive. And I think Mr. Peterson, what I got out of his comments the last meeting was, Browns Mill Road, it is what it is. So it has, and being what it is, makes me feel like there's too many negatives on this. So, and again, adding, as they say, the other 700 or so trips. And what got my mind from Mr. Benzola said was some point in time, the traffic count dropped from 3,000 to 2,000. And what I got to thinking is maybe that other 1,000 or so people saw Browns Mill for what it was and says, got too scared to drive down it anymore. So, and I don't go down there very once in a while. So my sympathies are with the residents too. But when I do, I cringe. Back to the width of the lanes, yes, they're standard as far as any other, I guess you call it the collector streets. But it's the psychological thing of driving down through there. And then, of course, the speed that Mr. Benzola's mentioned here this evening. So you get the feeling that you're getting squished in. And that's one of the reasons I don't go down through there very often. So I really, as far as my so-called logical thinking mind, is I don't see a way out of this. So I would respectively ask that you do not zone this to R4. And at the very least, due to the things that Mr. Penzola mentioned of all of the things that have to do, maybe postpone this and take a bigger study to it. Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Tip Brown, that I live adjacent to this property at 2817 Browns Mill Road. First thing I would like to ask you all is if this was going to happen beside of your house, how would you feel? 120 apartments beside your nice home. 120 apartments beside the 95-year-old farmhouse that I've spent the last 12 years remodeling. Now they're going to put 120 apartments beside me. I don't want this, and my neighbors don't want this. We don't want the lowered property values. Again, we don't want the extra traffic on the road. We don't need the hassle and the safety concerns of the ends of those streets where Browns Mill Road comes out. 720 more trips down that road is a lot more trips. 72 cars at those intersections during peak times, 10%, that's what we were told, is a lot more cars at those intersections at peak times. Your traffic count is not accurate because you did not count all the roads. You were like squeezed in on that one spot and you missed a whole lot of traffic going in and out the side streets in that. The section of road going up the hill is not 11 feet wide between the lines. I measured it today. I find it ironic that the Planning Commission made Mr. Gentry add a walkway through the 120 apartments for their safety, but has no concern for the safety of the people that are already there. I understand the current zoning would allow apartments, but this zoning would change it and almost double those numbers. I've talked to a lot of people when this process went on. I've walked through the neighborhoods. I've talked to people in the neighborhoods. I've talked to my friends who have drove in and out of my driveway on many, many times. And I've had strangers come up to me and talk to me since the Johnson City Press article came out. No one, not one person, except for Mr. Gentry and our planning committee, thinks this is a good idea. Not one person thinks it's a good idea. I know that Johnson City is in a growth mode. I know that you're wanting apartments. I know you're giving incentive to developers to build apartments. But is this really a good location for what they're wanting to do? I don't think it is. The people in my neighborhood don't think it is. And so I just hope that today you will come to the conclusion that it's not a good idea. And I do have one question I would like asked or answered at some point is what does the fire department think about this as added into this area in Johnson City? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to take my mask off too. My name is Carlene Looper. I live at 314 Swanee Drive. That is the road that Mr. Penzola is recommending a roundabout at. I have already emailed you. I included the email that I emailed to the Planning Commission with that email. So I will not discuss what I discussed in that email. I wanted to discuss some things that were mentioned in the first reading, but now that I have heard some other things about the roundabout at Swanee, which was not discussed earlier, because a roundabout at People Street was one of the things that I did want to talk about. In order for me to get to my place of employment, I can go two ways. I can go up the hill, up Browns Mill to People Street, through the crossings, down Knob Creek Road, and I work at Providence Academy, and I can get there that way. Or I can go down Browns Mill Road through Mountain View and still get there. I remember well how long it took for a roundabout at Browns Mill and Mountain View to be built. So a roundabout at People Street or a roundabout at Swanee will take time to be built, which will leave me at a problem at getting to my job. Okay, so that's the one thing I wanted to say about that. Mr. Penzola doesn't think that the backup of traffic at either Oakland or People Street is that big a deal, but I have to be at work at 7:30 in the morning. If I go down the hill to Oakland to try to turn out, there is already starting to be a backup there. It's at the beginning of the rush hour traffic. If I have to sit there for 5 minutes, and if I could leave earlier, I guess I could leave earlier, but already having to leave early enough to get to work at 7:30, it's hard to get up that early. If I have to sit there for 5 minutes to try to turn left out of there and I'm 5 minutes late to work, that's a problem. To him, it may not be a problem. To the residents, that is a problem. But the traffic concerns are not the only concerns to me and my neighbors.
Give about 5 seconds.
The other concern is the development. The developer wants to develop does not fit into our neighborhood. We're not against development. We just want a development that fits into our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Fred Counts, 2903 Browns Mill Road. Thank you for making time to hear from residents who care so deeply about their community. I know your time is valuable, so I'll try to be as succinct as I can. We all know that the secret is out. Johnson City is a great place to live. Census numbers show it, and the record numbers of folks from out of state that I see and meet at work every day show it. More people means more need for more houses and more apartments. And I don't believe anyone in this room is anti-growth. I only see and hear neighbors and friends who are concerned about the impact of a 120-unit apartment complex on a road that has seen few meaningful improvements in the last half century. As you know, many of us already have difficulty backing out of our driveways during our morning commutes. Pedestrians frequently walk this busy artery with no through sidewalk. I see them pass our house several times a day, and these problems aren't new. Editorials from residents to the Johnson City Press about dangerous driving conditions on this section of Browns Mill can be found back into the 1970s. In closing, this road needs sidewalks and improvements before additional housing and cars are placed on it. All of us are glad to see Johnson City growing. You, our commissioners, have the privilege to be a part of this exciting new chapter in our city's history. I implore you to continue to make the right choices when improving development to accommodate our growing population. Abraham Lincoln reminds us that you cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today. Fix the road, build some sidewalks, then build more housing, not the other way around. We're counting on you. Thank you for your time.
Johnson, 316 Swanee Drive. I wasn't going to speak, but I guess I had to speak because no one has brought up the subject of children. I have a 12-year-old and a 7-year-old who catch the bus at Swanee, at the corner of Browns Mill and Swanee. You don't know fear until you're standing at the bus stop with your children and people fly over the hill. And where the margin, you know, the lanes are narrower, there's some close calls. You know, I fear for my kids getting off the bus if I'm not there right at the point to get them. So the biggest thing is, you know, in my head, I'm questioning now, if you are putting a roundabout, how is that going to go with the bus picking children up from school? Swanee Drive is a very quiet road. You know, there's a farm that's right in front of it. The owner of that farm, he recently passed, and his wife constantly walks that every day. That's her little bit of solemn that she has left. And so, you know, I just ask that you could reconsider that. I do have children. I'm sure a lot of people here do have children that are on the road. They're just not here. But that's just my fear, you know, as a mother, is just making sure that my children can be at a bus stop and not have to worry about the excess traffic or someone not paying attention. And, you know, there's not an actual safe pad there for my child's pickup, because that's where Johnson City Schools have them pick up the kids. And that's for Town Acres and in Libertyville. Thank you.
Hello, I'm John Little, live at 2810 Browns Mill Road. I came home from the first reading disappointed in your letting it get this far along, and while I was pushing my trash down to the trash can, there's a pothole at the bottom of the hill, probably at the point where people reach that 47-mile-an-hour speed limit, that they swerve into the oncoming traffic at all the time. And that pothole has been there since my grandparents were alive. And every time they fix it, it's opened back up every 2 years, and this is at 2,000 cars. And he says we can go up to 12,000. They'll be fixing that thing every 2 months to keep cars from swerving in. And when I pushed my trash can down there that day, a car swerved out, and while I was watching it, the other car slammed on his brakes and blew his horn really loud. So it was a close call then. The workers that work for the city of Johnson City go through rigorous safety training, and one of the first rules that they learn is no economic decisions outweigh safety. And I would hope that you would consider that in this process, that it should extend to the citizens as well. I spoke to fellow developers in the area, and I believe that this rezoning is being fueled by greed, because a home builder, once it reaches above 40,000 an acre, they won't even think about putting single-family homes or duplexes on there. So anything above that, so he wants to charge 57,000 an acre, so that's why they'd have to have it rezoned to R4. So they are actually controlling policy on this to make it R4 so they can make it more profitable for them. Does that make sense? I get nervous when I get up here and talk. Let's see. If you could talk about maybe the political aspect of this, this is a chance for you to stand for the citizens of the area. Now, I voted for the 3 commissioners that are on the last ballot, and I ignored the D, the I, and the R beside their names because I trusted that they would do what was right for the city. Thank you.
I live at 2802 Browns Mill Road in Johnson City. My name is Amy Landers.
Thank you.
I'll be living right in front of where the complex are going to be, and I think that's going to be very dangerous for me and for everybody else. And I don't want it to happen. I think it's dangerous now, and if you put this complex over across where I live, it's gonna be even more. So the only thing I ask is for you not to have it approved. Thank you.
Hello, my name's James Little. I live at 108 Joy Drive. That's not in this area. But this is my playground when I grew up. So I know a little bit about the area. And not to repeat what everybody said, but two things that I want to bring up. One is traffic. This stretch of Browns Mill Road has 4 exits. The safest one is being Springbrook and North Rome where the traffic light is. The second one probably is People Street in Browns Mill. The third is Swanee, which is only a right-hand turn. And then you get to Oakland. Now, the reason I bring up Oakland, because I know Mr. Fowler, I think, made a comment at last time. Last month, I was out, and I thought at my son's house, they live across, along with my cousins on the old farm. I thought I'd go by and see what Boones Creek School looks like since they're tearing it down. So I went down to Oakland, which was my mistake. I was the 6th car in line for the right-hand lane and the 5th car in the left. Now, before I sat there for about 7 minutes, the 2 front cars decided to make a left-hand turn, to the chagrin of a lady coming out of the car wash, and also to the person who was turning into the car wash, which 2 head-ons right there, okay? This is a common occurrence every day. Go out there and sit and watch. Phil can go out there if we can wake him up. Okay? Sorry, excuse me. But let's get to the point to what this is. So all I'm saying is right here, you have got 1 exit off of Browns Mill Road that's actually available for the entire city of Johnson City. Go out there and look at it. Now, going back to Oakland and Browns Mill, after I finally got to my turn, I decided instead of going up by Walmart, I would just go to North Rome Street. I sat through 5 traffic light changes before I got to North Rome Street. And I think you can probably vouch for that, and so can Jenny, if I'm not mistaken from your last comment. There's also one other little problem I'd like to talk, since it was brought up. It's not what I had in mind talking about, but the roundabout at Swanee and that stream that runs through there. Now, with the size of the roundabout at the one that they built off Browns Mill up above Walmart, is going to take some space. And I do not see it being an elevation, how it comes up, that you're going to put a roundabout there. You're going to have to look at it. You all are going to have to go look at it to understand the layout. That is pretty near impossible. Now, like I said, I grew up out there, and there's a stream, and there's also an origin for that stream. There's a cave complex out there. Unit 4, I believe, and probably the other 3 units are going to be right above it, if not close to it. When I was little, I know my uncle, he's passed away now, but took me into that thing. You could bend down and walk in. I know. But it tees off there. To the north, it will go past underneath that first building, and it will go either in front of or underneath the other 3 buildings. Now, my grandfather told me that's where they drilled the well to get the water, because there's an underground river in there, supposedly. If you could get in there, you could hear it. I did. My uncle took me there. We were never to go in there without an adult. Now, if you go left, you can actually come out on Sunset Drive, right near where Regions Bank is, or at the time back in the 60s. My uncle did that. I have not been all the way through it, but I know it exists. And if you look at your engineering department, I think in the last 2 weeks they had to fix a sinkhole behind Kroger, which was an offspur of this cave system. So I guess my 3 minutes is up, but I'm sorry, but I cannot see adding 700 trips to a road that's already got just 1 exit, basically, for anybody who would want to even rent there to be able to go to Walmart or to the crossings or anywhere else. Now, I can see a lower, if it's north, even R2 or whatever you want to get smaller, but not 120 units in this space. I'm sorry, it's just not feasible in my point of view.
Thank you.
And that's all. Thanks.
There are no further comments. I don't want to cut anybody off if they're still collecting their thoughts, but for now, we'll close public hearing, turn to the commission.
I will just make a comment. The 47 miles per hour didn't surprise me a bit. In fact, I thought it might be just a little bit higher than that after driving on it, so.
I thought the test drive, the first person was going to tell, well, yeah, that's where we open them wide open. So,
And the other thing is knowing that we really need to do something with that road, whether this passes or not. We need to do something to slow down traffic. I'm glad Phil said that we need some traffic calming on it, whether something gets built or not there, just because I know if I slow down to turn on Sewanee and I'm on Browns Mill, I'm hoping nobody comes flying over the hill behind me if I see traffic coming, because they're not going to be able to stop before they come into me. So that's not the safest road in Johnson City, and I'm not very positive about this. So just letting you know.
I'll make some comments as I've kind of gone through this, and yes, I have been out kind of driving on the road since we met last time. Grew up in Johnson City, so very familiar with Browns Mill and all that area out there back in the 60s and 70s, for sure. You know, it currently is zone R3, which allows for multifamily development. That's what we've been talking about. It could have
70.
yeah, so it's much lesser. So something will go there. There's no two ways about it. But as I look at the request for zoning it to R4, the whole purpose is to increase the density of this project, to increase the amount of apartments and therefore traffic in this area. And Mr. Penzola, thank you for the data. I mean, I try to be a data-driven person, but there's a part of me too that says, what is reality? And for those of us who know that area, listening to our residents here, the reality is a little bit different. And probably one of the things that concerns me most about Browns Mill is that part that is so narrow that if you had to swerve off the road, you couldn't swerve off without going into a ditch. And so there's just not a lot of leeway on Browns Mill. So, you know, I do have concern about that, and I'm certainly leaning toward if Mr. Gentry wants to develop this as it's currently zoned, then he's certainly entitled to do that. But I'm not really leaning toward increasing the density in this area for the reasons I've stated.
Yeah, I guess I would just reiterate what Commissioner Brock said. This isn't a question about apartments or no apartments. It's not directly a question about traffic. It's a question about R3 versus R4. And I think it was Mr. Anderson who said he felt powerless. And I guess I want to suggest that you're not. You're being heard. One of the things that I think is unique about where we are right now is to make this deal work. For Mr. Gentry, he's looking at an increased density, okay? Because of that, he's going through this process, and you all get heard, and I'm sure you've heard the term binding site plan, where, you know, they begin to establish certain expectations of him for how it would be developed. That process affords you all considerably more opportunity to affect the outcome on this property than if it's left R3 and whoever buys it and does whatever they want, because they don't have to get input from anybody except for plans review. And so right now, you can have influence over where the dumpster is. You can have influence potentially over where the driveway is, over how the buildings are elevated. And that may still, I'm not a big fan of increasing density, so Don't hear me making the case for increasing density. Hear me making the case for, if you want to be powerless, leave it R3 and let somebody come in and do whatever they want. That's the ultimate no opportunity to influence what happens. And so, I mean, I'm kind of giving you some indication. I mean, I'm not super excited about increasing the density, but I also don't want you to miss the opportunity to have an impact on what happens there in a way that if it's R3 and just whatever anybody does that comports to R3, they don't have to ask anybody's opinion. And that's even a worse outcome by my account.
Well, I mean, I'm a banker, I'm pro-development, and I can only think of probably one time, having served on the planning commission and on the city commission, that I've voted in opposition to a project like this. And I think Mr. Gentry's products are, you know, quality and, you know, good product. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you all also seem to be pro-development. Planning commission is solely focused on land use. And so I think their decision was appropriate based on what their call of service is. And I appreciate Mr. Penzola and all the diligence and the work that he's done. And again, he's looking solely at traffic and statistics and those kind of things. And I think it's kind of incumbent upon us as the commission that we get the art of the holistic decision-making. And with that, you know, some of the things that we consider is the topography, the speed, more related to the safety aspects, like, the curve or the side of the road, no sidewalks. And I think Phil's recommendations on some of these measures on the road should be done. But ultimately, you know, with the safety concerns, there's not a lot that can be done. And I've got concerns about the entrance to the facility. And, you know, I mean, honestly, you know, having served on the planning commission, you know, the concerns about property value, I mean, we've seen these developments come and actually property values go up. But the safety is a concern for me, and so I'm leaning towards not approving this.
You want me to give an explanation?
Yeah, there's only five of us
I'm just
here.
ready to, I'm ready to cast
He's ready
a
to
vote.
vote.
I'm not in support, so,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna give the 10-minute explanation. It's just not a good idea, so.
So is there a motion?
Mayor, I would move that we deny the request for rezoning of the Browns Mill property.
A second.
Further discussion?
I just want to say, I think it should be developed and can be developed, and something nice can be there. I don't know that this is the right model for that piece of property.
Yeah, and I just want the neighbors to know this is an R3 versus R4 question. So understand what could come down the pike in a year may not look appreciably different except in unit count, and there won't be public hearings about it if it conforms to R3. So if there's no further objection, we'll call the roll.
Motion is to deny on second reading. Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fowler? Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Next order. Your next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4785-21. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt a code of laws and ordinances for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith and amendatory thereof by changing from I-2 heavy industrial zoning to PB planned business zoning, certain property located at 930 Riverview Drive, is ready for your consideration on second reading after public hearing.
This piece of property located on Riverview is adjacent to the Watauga River. They are looking to do a private RV campsite, so that's why we are recommending PB as a acceptable zoning district. Their concept plan is here, where they have 3 spots, some with decking, some with AstroTurf, just right along the river, something to pull in an RV and to pull out. Just to show you, they have at the planning commission meeting showed before and after pictures, and I'm sure that they will again. But just to kind of give you an idea, if you haven't had a chance to see it, the future land use map calls for this to be industrial. And one of the reasons we are recommending for planned business is because it's one of the districts that allows for private recreation, amusement, and wouldn't require sidewalks, which is probably not appropriate at this place. There was a neighbor, we've been over this is a neighborhood meeting. There was no public in attendance, and both staff and planning commission recommend approval. Additionally, I believe Mr. Peterson asked for something in writing about wastewater plant. I have asked for that, but maybe the applicant can speak more to that. Just a follow up from the first hearing.
I think we also talked about it's in the floodway, and was there going to be some question to TVA or something?
That is only, they would only have to get anything that they have to do would be through the Corps, but the TVA was only at the 1390 line, and this sits at 1402. So.
Hello, my name's Kent Odom, 1114 Waterbrook Lane, Johnson City, Tennessee. Daniel couldn't be here. He had the rest of the stuff for us. We do acknowledge your email on 2 things, which is the water can be rise pretty rapidly. We've been there. We had the property for a couple of years. This is our 2nd year. I've been monitoring the water, where the level's at, where's the safety at. We'll take all the precaution on the safety on the water rising. You can tell when it's raining. Even the neighbor, pretty much last night, she called from across the road, said, Kent, water's raining, your table's getting there. And most of us just, that place we're just gonna use for a picnic, when company picnic, or when there's nice day, beautiful day. We're not gonna go out there on a stormy day or raining day. We pretty much put in all the safety. And also, we acknowledge from the city where the foul smell coming from the city sewer, but we're not gonna be drinking from that water. Basically, we're just gonna be kayaking, have a picnic, have a outing, that's it. And also to get some, if we can tap into the city sewer system or water just for the bathroom for the women and stuff would be great. That's all we would want, nothing more than that. And nothing to be making business or anything. It's for our family to use it and for our employee to get out there. Hey, we got a place that you can go picnic, and for our staff, that's the main reason that we wanted the zone.
Mr. Peterson, your comment was about when y'all go there, you can't be complaining about the odor coming from the wastewater plant.
I just wanted to, my comment was aimed at, I want you to be aware before you get any further into this.
Yes, sir.
There will be odors.
Yes,
there will be
aware of that.
days down there that
Yes,
you
sir.
don't want to be there.
Yes, sir.
And there's, I just wanted to make sure that you understood that, and there's not a lot we can do
Yes, sir.
about it.
We understood that.
Okay, good. And
Because
like
we've
I
been
s-
there before, we saw it. We saw with somebody when the fish was dying, and one of our neighbor took the water to test it, and it was, it was fine. We understand all those.
Okay.
I grew up in a small poor town before that, in Laos, that I know what it is, and, I'm aware of that.
it wasn't that we're necessarily opposed to it. It's just I wanted you to be aware of everything that we were
Yes, sir, we
aware of
acknowledge that.
before you
Yes,
got
sir,
in.
we do.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And the rapid water rising, we acknowledge that. I seen that. I mean, I monitor that. I'd sit out there some night and look at it, especially on the rainy day and stuff. I'd see how fast it can rise, and we know I know exactly where I marked it exact. I have a trailer out there. I had to put a trailer out there because it came up so fast. I've been there, so past 2 years we've been monitoring it pretty consistently. And we have a camera out there that Daniel can see from his house when the water's rising. He's calling, hey, it's get the stuff out. We got neighbors very active that know us and they keep an eye on the place for us. And we have a police officer who patrol out there, you know, we say, hey, can you keep an eye on that? Tell us when things going, let us know. So we pretty much have a lot of stuff pretty secure. We understand about the foul smell, we do acknowledge that too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Need to open public hearing on second reading, just as a formality. So public hearing is now open. If anyone else wants to speak to this item, and if not, we'll close public hearing.
Move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. If there's no objection, we'll call the roll.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner
Hunter?
Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Mayor Wise?
Yes. There'll be one more reading and you're done.
Next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4786-21. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt code of laws and ordinances for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith, and amendatory thereof by changing from R4 medium density zoning to B4 planned arterial business zoning and MS1 medical services district, certain properties bounded by West Market Street, North State of Franklin Road, Sales Avenue, and Novus Drive is ready for your consideration on second reading after public hearing. Please, ma'am.
I will just briefly go over this because it is the public hearing. We talked about it, at the first reading, but just to show you where the property is and that this is the area that the city would like to zone MS1, which is adjacent to some B4. It's a little bit different than it shows in the future land use map, but staff does not feel that that is a big issue at all of those types of changes because the uses overlap. Some of them do. Just some pictures, and I think that's really all that I have. There's no site plan with this, so. These are the policies that are in place. I think just to say this, one of the things that planning does for this process is to look at our plans and policies and present them to you of the big picture things that you have put into place, so.
We'll open public hearing and invite anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposed. And close public hearing.
Move approval.
We have a motion.
Second.
And a second. If there's no objection, we'll call the roll.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
And Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Next ordinance is number 4787-21. An ordinance to amend Article 6, use requirements by district in the City of Johnson City zoning ordinance as it relates to the uses in the medical services district, is ready for your consideration on second reading after public hearing.
So essentially this, again, because it's the public hearing, I'll go over some highlights and not take too long. Essentially, this text amendment is removing a few things and then adding a couple of things. One of the things to add is for multifamily homes in the MS district. We're removing single family. We've done some analysis on that and we shared that at first reading, as well as gasoline service stations. We'll be removing that. But to show you where that this text amendment would apply, it's all the blue parcels on the left, and it also applies to the rezoning request. There are plans and policies such as being responsive and promoting, ways to retain opportunities to, I'm really losing my words today, to improve our relationships with businesses.
We'll open public hearing. Close public hearing.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Next ordinance is 4782-21, an ordinance adopting tax rates for the 2021 tax year. The rates are Washington County for $1.73 per hundred, Carter County and Sullivan County at $1.55 per hundred. These are the rates that were recommended. Equalized tax rates is recommended by the state. We would recommend your approval on third reading.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. No objection, we'll call the roll.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Mayor Wise?
Yes.
I have a question for Mr. Peterson. How do we stack up in the region, municipality-wise, our taxes?
You have the cheapest city-county combined tax rate this side of Morristown for sure, and maybe further. Our tax rates are very low.
We invest well.
We have accomplished a lot without heavy taxation of our citizenry.
We're good squeezers.
I see Janet smiling down there. You say we're good squeezers?
We're good squeezers, aren't we, Mr. Peterson?
It's
So what's next on our agenda, Mr. Peterson?
ordinance number 4783-21, an ordinance appropriating additional funds to the various departments and divisions of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, with the additional revenue from local, state, and federal sources, is ready for your consideration on third reading. This is your supplemental budget ordinance for the fiscal year that we just closed out. We would recommend your approval on third reading.
Move approval. We have a motion
Second.
and a second. There's no objection, we'll call the roll.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Takes you to the end of your agenda for action items. Quickly, in the manager's report, I would remind you that the Employee Service Award dinner has been postponed in respect to the rapidly increasing transmission of the COVID virus. It will hopefully be rescheduled sometime 2 or 3 months out. Next Thursday at the Johnson City Public Library, there will be a public discussion about the findings and a status update on child-friendly cities. We continue to have negotiations, not the right word, discussions with Washington County about properties that are in the Chancery Court sale for delinquent taxes and other liens. There are a number of properties out there that nobody has expressed interest in buying, so we're trying to work through a methodology to where we can get those properties back on the tax rolls. And due to the fact that they've been submitted to the court, it's not as easy as just saying, well, we're going to forgive the liens. So hopefully in the next month or so, you'll be seeing us bring a number of properties to you with a recommendation to get rid of those liens and get those properties into our hands where we can utilize them for redevelopment projects like we talked about earlier tonight.
Mr.
Lottie
Peterson, when
Ryan-
those go to sale, if the tax lien is, what keeps those from selling? The tax lien is greater than what anybody's willing to pay?
That is the case in some instances. In other instances, it's a remnant property and there's not a lot you can do with it. Sometimes it's a property that's going to, maybe the liens aren't that heavy against it, but it's going to take quite a bit of an expense to get the property ready to build. So it's a variety of issues as to what gets them in the property tax sale. Lottie Rhines and Alicia Summers and several others have done a great job of keeping a discussion going about childcare. I think we talked about that at the last meeting. Those conversations are ongoing, and we hope to have something to bring to you here in the next couple of months about a potential solution to facilitate additional childcare in the region. Unfortunately, we're back to where we were year, 18 months ago with the transmission of the COVID virus. We have, and I think I'm passing along to you all, weekly updates on Wednesday concerning schools, and on Fridays, the general public. Transmission is exceptionally high. About 35% of all positive tests that Ballot does are children younger than 18 years of age. Over 90% of those cases hospitalized are unvaccinated individuals in our communities. The school system continues to see an increasing number of students that are having to go home due to quarantine or being positive. One thing that has changed from the initial onset of the pandemic is that initially the federal government mandated that there be additional paid leave for employees that were impacted by the COVID virus. That is no longer the case. So folks that are being impacted are going to have to use their personal time if their employer provides that. They're going to be away from work, those types of things. I think it's proven that the vaccination works. There's several 100 million people on this planet that have had the vaccination, and there have been extremely few adverse reactions or deaths as a result of a vaccination. The vaccine works. Masks do prevent the spread of germs. If they didn't, doctors wouldn't wear them when you go in to visit them in their office and various other things. We can control this. We just need to work together to promote scientific evidence and quit trying to politicize science. We all need to work together, or we're going to start experiencing what schools are currently experiencing with students, and we are experiencing in some of our departments. We have an absence of people to work because they're out sick or they're home in quarantine. We need to help people prevent that. So as you are aware, we do have a mask mandate in all city facilities, and so far we have had very good compliance with that, no problems. And we would encourage everyone to help us get past this and get control of this virus.
I add something to that as well. Pete and I were at Lab Connect yesterday, and Alan Levine was there, and we had a chance to talk with him for some time. One of the other things that's happening because of the rapid spread through our schools, that many of the school-age children are children of healthcare workers, nurses and doctors, and so they've now all of a sudden seen an absence of these parents who have to stay home with their kids. I think at Indian Trail there are 3 hallways that are completely closed, with others following suit. So it's rapidly expanding. My own granddaughter, my daughter got a call today before noon to come and pick her up to go into quarantine. So it is really something, but it's affecting the healthcare side of the business as well, and they're already overstretched. We were also told out there by one of their VPs who was with Alan that at the end of kind of the season last year, that they had, I think it was over 200 healthcare workers retire, that last year just kind of wore them out. And they went ahead and took retirement, so they're short even just from that. So it's getting very, very serious. The other thing Alan mentioned to us too, and Dr. Fowler, you may know a little bit more about this, but because so many children are getting COVID now, that they're really concerned about the multi-symptom inflammatory syndrome that young children can get, and that they have a lot of concern about that. About 6 weeks from now, that we could start seeing signs of that in our community, and that requires a lot of hospitalization. That would put, a real task on Niswonger Children's Hospital if they can have the capacity to treat those children. They're full already, so it's like, where do they go? And I just saw where Washington County schools put a mask mandate in just a little while ago or late this afternoon.
We have, we're short 12 bus drivers today, school bus drivers. Several of those folks have decided that it's time to retire due to a variety of reasons, one of which is the potential exposure to the COVID virus. And from what I understand, we potentially have 3 or 4 more that are contemplating leaving because of the potential exposure to the virus. So we are very firm in our position that anyone in a city facility, which includes a school bus, because those are owned and operated by the city of Johnson City, shall wear a mask. My feedback from Eldona this morning was that there have been, I think, fewer than 10 students that they had to have a conversation with about wearing masks. Masks are on the bus, so if the child shows up and doesn't have a mask, we're providing them a mask. This is a situation that it appears that the children are very compliant and without problems, and we're hopeful that we can continue on that path and that we can retain enough employees to keep a school transportation system going. But due to illness or fear of illness, if we continue to lose drivers, we're going to have to make some pretty significant changes to the provision of school transportation. So that's something we're very concerned about and working on very diligently to ensure that we don't have an interruption. But it's another one of those side effects of the pandemic at this point that we're having to deal with. And I would answer any questions or take any direction that you may have for staff or I.
Commissioner Hunter? No. Commissioner Brock?
I'll just finish my comment on the Lab Connect. It was announcement of an additional expansion on their part. We were there about a year ago when they made the decision to move their corporate headquarters here, and they've grown tremendously in this past year. Senator Blackburn was there, and Congresswoman Harshberger were there, and they were very glad to see this kind of economic activity during, a real stressful time that we've had this past year. So it's good to be there.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes, sir.
Vice Mayor?
Talk about something else good. The first annual Railroad Rumble. Tomorrow night, Science Hill and Elizabethton. Hopefully it'll be the first of many Railroad Rumbles, but the first game of the year for football outside, not at Science Hill where it's supposed to be, but at ETSU because you can get more people at ETSU in the stadium, and it's going to be rocking tomorrow night. So game is at 7, not 7:30. That's the other. I'm not sure why, because it's been at 7:30 regular season for 28 years that I've been here, and they moved it to 7 o'clock, which is usually playoffs. I kind of like 7:30 start when it's 90 degrees outside, but especially on AstroTurf. But that starts tomorrow night. We're back at football again.
How's the turf?
Turf's coming along really nice. The weather's shut them down the last couple of days, but I think they've got us walk through to finalize it on Tuesday morning. Looks good.
So it's installed.
It's a much bolder appearance than the original installation. I think everybody's very pleased with it, and it'll look good. And
Should hopefully less injuries now, so I'm happier about that too.
I'm going to take advantage of this. Prior to the ball game tomorrow night at ETSU, the boys basketball team is having a cookout for a fundraiser. So for $10, you can stop by and get a hamburger and a drink and some sort of side. And
where are they setting that up? So all
they're
those
setting
people-
that up outside the north end zone, or the end zone away from Boundary Road.
Lot 22, I think. Is that right?
I think it is lot 22. I need to read my emails closer, but it's There'll be a big tent and a bunch of kids
That
serving
knowledge of
hamburgers.
obscure parking lots. I've got a
He'll
daughter
start
that
about
wants to
6.
go to it.
Maybe 5:30 with the game starting at 7 even, so I need to get there early.
I'd like to add, just to tie into Lab Connect, you know, as we've made investments in businesses to recruit, we also made investments to retain businesses, and Crown recently was recognized in Inc.com in their list of the 5,000 fastest growing privately held companies, and have grown over almost 300% over the past year. And so it's great to see, you know, our partnerships with these businesses that have paid dividends for the city and our community and the world.
But if there's nothing further, we'll stand adjourned.